Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says the country is already working on concrete security guarantees in the case a ceasefire is agreed, as Trump pushes for a direct Zelensky-Putin meeting and says he wants to get a deal done as quick as possible. This comes as Ukraine's foreign minister says Russian attacks show it is critical to end the war. This comes as Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov declared that any meeting between presidents of Russia and Ukraine to resolve the conflict must be prepared very thoroughly. Also, he emphasized Ukraine peace deal must guarantee Russia's security and the rights of Russian-speaking people in Ukraine. His remarks follow the high-level talks on Sunday. Qatar says the latest Gaza ceasefire proposal, very much like the one that was proposed by US envoy Steve Witkoff, of course, has been agreed reportedly by Hamas, as Israel now studies a deal for a 60-day truce and the release of half the remaining hostages after Hamas agreed to it on Monday. Meanwhile, the UN Human Rights Office warned that Israel is not allowing enough supplies into Gaza to avert widespread starvation. China says they are not party to the Ukraine crisis as meetings between European leaders take place today. Ukraine and Europe also met with the US officials in Washington. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer is set to chair a coalition of the willing meeting. Pierre Poilievre has won a special election in Alberta, returning to Parliament after losing his seat in the April elections. Poilievre, who accuses the Liberal government of mishandling relations with Washington, will confront Carney when the House of Commons resumes next month. Meanwhile, Air Canada and the Canadian Union of Public Employees, representing 10,000 flight attendants, have now concluded their 4-day strike after reaching a tentative agreement. Air Canada has also warned that it may take 7 to 10 days to resume a full service. At least 25 people have been rescued, with 25 others presumed dead after a boat carrying around 50 passengers capsized in Nigeria's Sokoto state, that according to its National Emergency Management Agency. Authorities have blamed the accident on overloading and poor infrastructure, while rescue efforts were hindered by strong currents from a nearby dam. And Somalia has recorded over 1,600 diphtheria cases and 87 deaths in 2025, nearly doubling the cases from last year amid severe vaccine shortages. Health official Hussein Abdikar Muhyiddin warned that hundreds of thousands of children remain unvaccinated. But we start this hour with comments from US President Donald Trump, who says he wants to end the war in Ukraine quickly and not waste any time. In an interview, he described his warm relationship with Vladimir Putin as a good thing, while admitting it's possible the Russian leader may not want a deal. Trump said Ukraine should not have sought NATO membership and suggested the country may lose significant territory. Trump said Zelensky and Putin are doing okay, but warned the situation remains fragile. Well, joining us to discuss these comments by Donald Trump is Julius Stoy, a journalist who joins us live from Berlin. Julius, thank you ever so much for taking the time to speak with us. Let's start with Trump saying he wants to get this deal done quickly. Is that necessarily the best thing for all parties involved?
I think it's quite typical for Donald Trump to do things like the fastest way possible, because of his history as a quite problematic president, and also his promises which he didn't kept real for a long time. So in my opinion, no, it isn't the best solution, because in first things, a ceasefire. When they met, there was first discussed a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine, but it's not a solution. It's just a temporary solution to gather more resources for war funding between the two countries. So.
Yes, and Julius, of course, a lot of effort going in from European nations to try and look at finding a solution for Ukraine that is beneficial to them, but also Ukraine as well, with fears after that Trump-Putin meeting that Trump may side with Russia. How significant is that support for Ukraine from Europe?
I think it's quite significant. When von der Leyen and Friedrich Merz visited together with Zelensky the White House, I think it wasn't like yesterday, like the press speaker of the White House told us like they're there to protect Zelensky from being bullied, but it was just to show like some solidarity with like Ukraine, because like Germany still stands with Ukraine, clearly.
Yes, of course. Trump talking about his relationship with Vladimir Putin, saying that a warmer relationship between the two is good. What do you think he means by that?
It's quite complicated because like he does like something never an US leader has done before. When we think about like Cold War times and so on, like US and Russia are like big enemies usually for every president, and he wants like for the first time as a president make like a friendship between those two nations. And I think it's more about like resources and gathering like financial investments like forest, for example.
Yes, Julius. Trump also talking about the fact that Ukraine should not have sought NATO membership. Where is he positioning himself in this conversation about defence? Of course, NATO is a key part of defence securities, and Ukraine looking for that. Is Trump's comment, in your opinion, helpful, or is this a red line that can't be crossed in order to end a peace deal, and therefore Trump is saying these comments, obviously thinking about Russia's wants in this ceasefire talk as well?
I think like Ukraine, this whole conflict is like a middleman between like NATO and like Russia. So of course, Ukraine wants like to remain like his solitude, but it hasn't like any chance without like the NATO. So like yeah, what he said is like quite problematic.
Yes, Julius, please do stay with us because we are going to move to a related development now. Kyiv has reported that Moscow has repatriated another 1,000 bodies of Ukrainian servicemen as part of previous agreements brokered between the two warring countries. The Ukrainian government noted that 5 of the repatriated soldiers had died in captivity and said tests would be conducted to identify remains from eastern Ukraine and Russia's Kursk region. According to reports, Moscow also received 19 bodies of fallen Russian soldiers in return. This comes after President Vladimir Putin had previously indicated that Russia would hand over an additional 3,000 bodies of Ukrainian soldiers beyond the 6,000 already transferred. Well, Julius, thank you for once again staying with us. Of course, conversations that have happened up until the last week or so, direct talks between Russian and Ukrainian delegations have led to these swapping of bodies and prisoners of war. Of course, that is progress. How significant is it that these are still ongoing despite the concern and ongoing discussions around ending the war permanently?
I think it's like a tactic because like Zelensky told like the Ukrainian people that they get like a compensation for like the families of foreign soldiers. So like the Ukrainian government has to pay like those families, and it's like quite like how do I say it? It's like Ukraine has like to pay more for their own like people and can't invest anymore in like armory or like weapons and so on. So that's like the tactic of Russia, basically.
Yes, and Julius, of course, so many different moving parts in these discussions. One thing that has been spoken about is also territory. As we have this information about further swaps of bodies and, of course, prisoners of war that have been exchanged previously, do you think there would be any movement on swapping territory as well, based on the fact that Russia now own or control at least 20% of Ukraine, something that Zelensky has previously spoken about being a non-negotiable?
It is non-negotiable because, like, also like for the German Republic, for the German politicians, like Friedrich Merz said, it's not like an option for like Zelensky to give up like his own country, his own people, which are living currently under oppression to the Russian regime.
Julius, stay with us once again because we're going to go to another development now, and this comes as China says it will continue to play a constructive role in promoting a political settlement to the war in Ukraine. Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Mao Ning told reporters in Beijing that China is not a priority to the conflict but has consistently pushed for peace and dialogue since day one. She stressed Beijing's stance remains objective and impartial and said China is ready to work with the international community to support negotiations in line with the will of all parties involved. We'll now hear what Mao Ning had to say.
在乌克兰危机上的立场是一贯的、明确的。中国不是乌克兰危机的制造者，也不是当事方，但从危机爆发第一天起，根据当事方意愿，同国际社会一道，继续为危机的政治解决发挥建设性。
Well, Julius, thank you once again for staying with us. China saying that they're impartial and want to work towards a continued peace efforts. They haven't been involved in any direct discussions, but this is also amidst concern from Europe. We've had reports that Europe could be potentially readying sanctions over the sale of Chinese technology, which could be used in weapons by Russia. Do you think China are impartial in this conflict?
Yes, they are, obviously, because like they are like very big country with like a big tech industry, and they sell like big tech to like Russia, to an oppressor. So it's basically, yeah, they have like their own party.
Yes, and Julius, how could China be involved in these ongoing discussions? Of course, bringing in another global superpower if they are potentially involved. How do you see this playing out?
I can say it for now. You can tell, but I see it like as a big involvement in like this war, which China has absolutely nothing to do with. Actually, it's like a conflict between Ukraine and Russia, but China sees like a big selling point in this war because like it makes like big money. So, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And Julius, let's now bring a close to this wider conversation around a potential end to this war. What do you think is needed now that so many conversations have been had with Europe, with the US, with Russia and Ukraine separately? Is it as simple as Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin getting in a room to hash this out, or is there further stuff that needs to be agreed upon?
I absolutely think not that this will be like the final solution. I don't think so, because like so many people are dead now, so many cities are destroyed. There can't be like peace without like final solutions, with some guarantees that there will be peace for at least 10, 15 years, not like 2 years.
Yes, absolutely. Julius, thank you ever so much for taking the time to speak with us from Germany. Of course, so many updates coming in on this topic, and we will continue to bring those to you. We'll move on now as Qatar's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Majid Al-Ansari has said that the latest Gaza ceasefire proposal agreed by Hamas is almost identical to an earlier plan put forward by US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. This comes as efforts to pause the fighting reportedly gained new momentum over the past week after Israel announced plans for a new offensive to seize control of Gaza City. Meanwhile, Egypt and Qatar have been pushing to restart indirect talks between the sides on a US-backed ceasefire plan. According to reports, a Hamas official has said that the proposal includes the release of 200 Palestinian convicts jailed in Israel and an unspecified number of imprisoned women and minors in return for 10 living and 18 deceased hostages from Gaza. Qatar's Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson has said that the 60-day truce deal would include a pathway to comprehensive agreements by the end, to end the war. Reportedly, Israel had previously agreed to the outline advanced by US Special Middle East Envoy Steve Witkoff, but negotiations faltered over some of its details. The last round of talks ended in deadlock in late July. We'll now listen to what Qatar's Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson has had to say.
كما قلنا من حركة حماس بالنسبة لنا رد إيجابي جدا ويمثل حقيقة صورة شبه متطابقة لما تم الموافقة عليه مسبقا من الطرف الإسرائيلي، ولكننا ما زلنا طبعا بانتظار رد الطرف الإسرائيلي على هذا المقترح أو على الرد على هذا المقترح الذي وصلنا. وما يمكن التأكيد عليه أيها الزملاء أن نحن الآن لسنا فقط كما نقول دائما في لحظة محورية وفي لحظة حاسمة وما إلى ذلك، نحن الآن في لحظة إنسانية فارقة. إن لم نصل إلى اتفاق الآن فنحن أمام كارثة إنسانية ستجعل الكوارث التي سبقتها يعني تتقزم أمامه. بالنسبة لنا يمثل أفضل الخيارات الممكنة في إطار حقن دماء الأشقاء في قطاع غزة، خاصة في إطار التصعيد العسكري المستمر والخطط التي نعلمها جميعا ونسمع عنها في وسائل الإعلام. بالتالي هذا المقترح سيتضمن مسارا للوصول إلى اتفاق شامل لإنهاء الحرب، كما بطبيعة الحال هو يتضمن وقف مؤقت لإطلاق النار لمدة 60 يوما. خلال هذا الوقف المؤقت يتم تبادل عدد من الأسرى والرهائن، ولكن أيضا إعادة تموضع الإسرائيلية في إطار هذا الاتفاق تترافق مع دخول مكثف للمساعدات حسب لغة
Well, joining us to discuss this development is Matti Zweig, a geopolitical expert who joins us live from Israel. Matti, of course, talk about this potential ceasefire agreement, but I do bring some breaking news, and we've had it from government sources, that Israel is demanding the release of all hostages in any Gaza deal. Do you think this was inevitable from the Israeli government?
Well, I'm just in this moment in Jerusalem, and I see that everything continues to be unclear, because after all the proposals and all the negatives of Hamas until now, everyone is skeptical about the possibility of going back to the identical propositions from the past, to stop for 60 days without any clear outcome, what is going to be after that, how it's going to continue, and also releasing just the half of the hostages. And this is something that nobody wants, because they say if they are not going to be released all in one piece, I mean, the life and the dead, so nothing is good is going to be also in the future. We're going to be in the same point as we are now. So this is the claim of the families. They say, try to get out everyone that you can and try to bring all of them together, finishing the war. Finishing the war, it means also leaving Hamas on power, which anyone in Israel government and also outside, I would say, most of the people don't want, because it means that in the future we're going to have a reorganization of this group to try to do again another 7th of October. So this is one of the greatest dilemma in the history of the country, because to say yes to this kind of things, it means to leave them in power, and nobody, including also Arab countries, they want Hamas to stay in power. And this is the big dilemma.
Yes, Matti, one question that will be asked if Israel has said no to this. Qatar saying that the deal that Hamas is agreeing to is almost identical to one that Israel agreed to previously. What's now changed?
Yeah, it was 60 days with half of the dead and half of the people that is still alive, supposedly. So this is in exchange for 60 days of peace and future negotiations for the ending of all the hostilities. So I think that most of the people, they say, just bring everyone that you can, and we will see what happens in the future. But everyone is really tired about this. And this is also another fact now that is very strange, is that Qatar all the time was trying to do everything as a mediator alone. And this time, all sides were agreed to include also Egypt, that they have ties also with Hamas and can help in this mediation. So this is an interesting fact. It means that Qatar also is under pressure to give Donald Trump and to the also their public image, that it was also quite damaged from all the information that they were going along all these years, a lot of money to funnel all the fights from the extremists in all the Middle East, and not only Hamas.
Yes,
this
absolutely.
is from one side. And from the other side, also the government in Israel, the big dilemma for them is not only to agree, is how to continue as a government, which means also an internal political problem for the government of Benjamin Netanyahu.
Okay, Matti, let's build on that. Sorry to interject. I do want to build on that because, of course, there have been widespread protests across Israel. We know that has been the case. A lot of sentiment about ending the war and striking a hostage deal. If this report is correct, and if the sources from within the Israeli government can confirm and have confirmed that this deal won't be agreed to, what will the public sentiment be in Israel, given that there already has been so much of an outcry against Benjamin Netanyahu's current path forward?
Well, you know, Benjamin Netanyahu is the only politician in the world that can convert a square in a circle or the contrary. And this is what he has been doing all the time with his government that is opposed to most of the things that had been done until now, part of them, the most extremist. And also there have been a lot of internal problems even with the chief of staff that was very criticized for his position that this is not the time to conquer the city of Gaza, that it can put in danger also the hostages and also other military points, not only this. So let's see what they are going to decide. But of course, for most of the people in Israel, this is a situation that must be changed and decisions have to be made in one way or another.
Yes, absolutely. Matti, how do you think the US might respond to Israel potentially saying no to this deal, a deal similar reportedly to one that US envoy Steve Witkoff has proposed? Do you think Trump will get frustrated?
Well, it depends of the answer, because if Israel say intelligently, let's say, yes, but, or no, but, with some points to be changed, so maybe Trump is not going to be frustrated. He's going to give another 3-4 days or 1 week more for this. But if they are plainly going to say no, this is another blow to Donald Trump efforts to make something different in this area, because at the same time that they are talking about the end of the war, in the same time, parallelly, they are talking about giving to hundreds of thousands of Gazans some kind of plan to go to live in Somalia or Sudan or places like this. There are a lot of voices talking at the same time about different things. So decision must be done in the next 48 hours, I hope, for good or bad.
Yes, and Matti, as we bring an end to this discussion, of course, there has been talk about the situation within Gaza from groups like the UN, NGOs, more than 100 in recent times talking about the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Also, world leaders speaking out about it. Of course, 60 days would allow a lot more comprehensive support that those that are potentially injured, those that are struggling without concrete food supplies. Is this, do you think, a move against humanity from Israel if they don't agree to the ceasefire?
I think if they are not going to agree to this kind of ceasefire that the terrorist group Hamas is offering, so the situation is going to continue to be the same, trying to deliver humanitarian aid and at the same time trying to cope with terrorists infiltrating all the points of distribution and creating chaos to try to take part of this aid. If it's going to be even a 60-day ceasefire, the situation is going to be much better, especially because the American companies with Israel are going to deliver much better all the humanitarian aid. And let's see what is the situation of Hamas, if they are going to recover power in a situation of a ceasefire, with the humanitarian aid increased, yes or not.
Absolutely, Matti. Thank you ever so much for joining us with that big news that we bring you. Reports suggesting Israel aren't going to agree to a ceasefire that Hamas has said yes to. There's so many ramifications and so many further reactions that we expect. We'll bring all of those to you when we get them. But let's now move back to Europe, and Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has warned that difficult hours remain in the fight against wildfires ravaging the country, despite the dropping of temperatures. After 16 days of scorching heat, touching up to 45 degrees Celsius at points, Prime Minister Sanchez has earlier called for a nationwide pact uniting all levels of government to combat what he called an accelerating climate emergency as wildfires raged in several parts of the country. In the third week of heatwave alerts, firefighters are continuing to battle blazes in the northwest and west of the country, with army units deployed to help contain the flames. PM Sanchez has urged the affected people to be attentive to the recommendations of the institutions. We'll now listen to what he has said.
La reflexión parece que llega a su fin y que efectivamente bajan las temperaturas. Podemos ver en distintas partes de España, ojalá pronto también aquí en Extremadura, un aumento de la humedad. A ver si podemos controlar también, ¿no? Se pueden controlar esos vientos por parte del clima y por tanto podamos tener mejores condiciones climáticas y medioambientales meteorológicas para poder afrontar este incendio. Pero decía porque quedan horas difíciles y por tanto a los medios de comunicación les pido, y también a los ciudadanos y ciudadanas que nos estén siguiendo en esta comparecencia de prensa, que extremen las precauciones, que no nos confiemos, que quedan momentos críticos, que quedan horas difíciles y que por tanto hagan caso y permanezcan atentos a cuáles sean las recomendaciones de las instituciones. Desde 1975 no se registra en España una ola de calor de la duración que ha tenido esta del año 2025. ¿Esto qué quiere decir? Quiere decir que con independencia de cuál sea la causa de los incendios, es evidente, nos lo dice la ciencia, nos lo dice también el sentido común, sobre todo de los agricultores y de ganaderos, de aquellos que viven en el medio rural, que el clima está cambiando, que la emergencia climática se está agravando.
Well, joining us to discuss these comments and, of course, the wider ramifications of not just global warming, but also these wildfires that have been impacting so much of areas of Europe, is Desmond Majekudunmi, who is an environmentalist joining us live from Lagos. Desmond, before we jump into talking about the environment, I do have another update that I need to bring, and this states that the public health body in Spain has said that 1,100 deaths have been reported linked to this recent heat wave. We heard Spain's leader there talking about this being one of the worst heat waves since the mid-70s, with such a significant amount of death being caused by heat, something which we know is getting worse. What needs to be done?
Well, the reality is that finally we've got somebody in charge of a country that is apparently recognizing it for what it is, which is exactly what the Secretary General of the United Nations said at the last World Summit last year. He said it's no longer a crisis, it's an emergency. This is an emergency that is facing planet Earth, and it is an unprecedented one. Never before in the living memory, the history of humanity, have we ever faced this type of catastrophic consequences that are coming out from nature. So what needs to be done is, first and foremost, get it into our consciousness that this actually is an emergency and we need to tackle it. And as we've said before, prevention is better than cure. So what's causing all this heat? Well, we've also said, and it's very, very clear and obvious, this is, like elementary science, that heat trapping gases in the atmosphere keep this Earth at a certain temperature. If you increase these gases exponentially, as we are doing, then you're going to have a lot more heat. And when you have a lot more heat, you're going to have these kind of reactions. The reality is that what we're seeing now, in terms of the death rates, in terms of these incredibly voracious fires, and on the other extreme, the floods, this is just the beginning of what shall be forthcoming if we don't stop burning the items that are causing this, which is mainly fossil fuel, and protecting our forests. So yeah, it's an emergency, and some of the leadership now appears to at least be declaring it as an emergency, as opposed to in a certain part of the world, they're actually denying that it exists. It's like, 2 + 2. Well, that doesn't really, that's fake news if you're going to be telling me that 2 + 2 is 4. I mean, come on, man. For God's sake, wake up, humanity.
Yes,
to this reality.
Desmond, we are very short on time. We have around a minute left, but you've alluded to there one world leader talking about this emergency. But we have a leader in the US who is talking drill, baby, drill, a key slogan, of course, looking at expanding the US oil industry. Is it going to take a superpower like the US or China or Russia, who of course are so key in the oil trade, to make any real difference here? Because Spain, speaking on their own, might not resonate with these global superpowers.
Yes, well, they need to start behaving like a responsible superpower. The wonderful silver lining on this very, very, very dark cloud is it is going to bring humanity together. And we have organizations like yours that are transferring, just going all around the world, connecting us. We need to come together as, brothers and sisters, living on our only home that is in dire trouble. And once we can do that, we'll have far more compassion, we'll have a far more caring place, and we will make this world a better place. And in the process, stop the poison and plant millions and billions of trees and care for nature so nature can care for us.
Desmond, thank you ever so much for joining us. We will, of course, continue to monitor those wildfires in Spain and other parts of Europe. But that is